In the midst of lights, cameras, and carefully scripted scenes, a moment of genuine humanity quietly unfolded between Sally Field and Robin Williams. A moment that revealed far more than any performance ever could. While working together on Mrs. Doubtfire, what began as another day on set suddenly turned deeply personal when Sally Field received the heartbreaking news of her father's passing. In that instant, the world of film faded, and something real took its place. Robin Williams, known to millions for his humor and boundless energy, showed a different kind of brilliance, one rooted in empathy and instinct. Without hesitation, he recognized her pain and stepped in, not as a co-star, but as a compassionate human being, urging her to leave and be with her family. It was a quiet act, but a powerful one, revealing that behind the laughter was a man who understood the weight of loss and the importance of presence. In that moment, his true character was not defined by the roles he played, but by the kindness he showed when it mattered most. And that is a kind of legacy that goes far beyond the screen that I end the world of filmmaking, where every moment is carefully planned and every emotion is often rehearsed. There are rare instances when reality breaks through the script. These moments are not written, not directed, and not performed. They are lived. One such moment unfolded between Sally Field and Robin Williams during the making of Mrs. Doubtfire. And in that moment, what was revealed was not just professionalism, but humanity in its purest form at the time. The film was a major production, filled with energy, creativity, and the unique comedic brilliance that Robin Williams brought to every role. His presence on set was often described as lively and unpredictable, filled with humor that could transform even the most ordinary scene into something unforgettable. But behind that humor was something deeper, an emotional awareness that many did not always see. For Sally Field, the experience of working on the film was already meaningful. As an accomplished actress, she brought depth and authenticity to her role. But nothing prepared her for the moment when her personal life suddenly collided with her professional one. During filming, she received devastating news. Her father had passed away. In an instant, everything changed. The set, the lights, the cameras, all of it faded into the background as reality took over. It was no longer about acting or performance. It was about grief, loss, and the overwhelming weight of emotion that comes with such news. In that moment, Robin Williams noticed something. It was not something spoken out loud, not something announced. It was something felt. He recognized her pain before it was fully expressed, and without hesitation, he insisted that she leave the set immediately and be with her family. He worked with the production team to rearrange the filming schedule, ensuring that she had the time she needed. This was not part of his role. It was not expected of him. It was a choice, one that reflected his character more than any performance ever could. This act of kindness may seem simple, but in the context of a major film production, it carried significant weight. Time is money in the film industry. Schedules are tight and delays are costly. Yet in that moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was a person in pain and the need to support them. For Sally Field, this gesture was not just helpful, it was deeply meaningful. It showed that even in a highly structured and demanding environment, compassion could take priority. It showed that behind the roles and the reputations, there were real people capable of understanding and empathy. The story also reveals something important about Robin Williams himself. Known around the world for his humor, he was often seen as someone who brought joy to others. But this moment highlights a different aspect of his personality, the ability to connect with others on a deeper emotional level. This duality is what made him so unique. He could make people laugh, but he could also understand their pain. He could entertain millions, but he could also focus on one person in a moment of need. This balance between humor and empathy is rare, and it is what made his presence so impactful. As time passed and stories like this began to emerge, they helped shape the way people remembered him, not just as a performer, but as a person, someone who uses influence not just to entertain, but to support and uplift those around him. The film Mrs. Doubtfire went on to become a beloved classic, remembered for its humor and heart. But behind the scenes, moments like this added another layer to its legacy, one that cannot be seen on screen, but is felt through the stories shared by those who were there. For Sally Field, this experience remained significant long after the film was completed. It became part of her memory of working with Robin Williams, a reminder of his kindness and his ability to recognize what truly mattered in a given moment. This story also speaks to a broader truth about human connection. In any environment, whether it is a film set, a workplace, or everyday life, there are moments when compassion becomes more important than productivity. Moments when taking a step back is more valuable than moving forward. And it is in those moments that character is revealed for Robin Williams. This was one of those moments. A moment that showed who he was beyond the roles he played. A moment that demonstrated that true impact is not always measured by success, but by the way we treat others when it matters most as the years have gone by. Stories like this have become part of his legacy. They remind us that behind the laughter was a person who understood the complexities of life, who recognized pain, and who chose to respond with kindness. In the end, the story of Sally Field and Robin Williams is not just about what happened on a film set. It is about what happens when one person sees another in a moment of vulnerability and chooses to help. It is about empathy, about awareness, and about the simple but powerful act of being there for someone when they need it most. Because long after the cameras stop rolling and the scenes are completed, it is these moments, the real unscripted ones, that leave the deepest and most lasting impression. And in that quiet act of understanding, the true character of Robin Williams continues to be remembered, not just as a great actor, but as a truly compassionate human being. As the story continues to unfold beyond that single moment, the memory of what happened between Sally Field and Robin Williams begins to take on an even deeper meaning. It is no longer just about one act of kindness. It becomes a reflection of how small human decisions can leave a lasting impact that goes far beyond the moment itself. In an industry often driven by schedules, expectations, and performance, moments like these stand out because they break that pattern. They remind us that behind every role, behind every scene, there are real lives unfolding, lives that do not pause just because the cameras are rolling. And in those moments, the choices people make reveal who they truly are. For Sally Field, that day was not about acting. It was about loss, about stepping away from everything familiar and facing something deeply personal. The ability to do that without resistance, without pressure, was made possible because someone understood. Someone saw what she was going through and chose compassion over convenience. That choice mattered. It mattered not just in that moment, but in the way it stayed with her over time. Because acts of kindness are not forgotten easily, especially when they come at a time when they are needed most. They become part of memory, part of how we remember people, and part of how we define their character. For Robin Williams, this moment was not something he likely saw as extraordinary. It was simply the right thing to do. And perhaps that is what makes it so powerful, that true kindness often does not seek recognition. It exists naturally without expectation. There's also something important to understand about empathy. It is not always about having the perfect words or knowing exactly what to say. Sometimes, it is simply about recognizing that someone is hurting and giving them the space they need. That recognition, that awareness, is what makes a difference. As the years pass and stories like this continue to be shared, they begin to shape a larger picture. A picture of a person who was not only talented, but deeply aware of the people around him. Someone who could bring joy to millions, yet still focus on one individual when it truly mattered. This balance between public success and private compassion is rare. It is easy to be admired for talent. It is much harder to be remembered for kindness. And yet, it is often kindness that leaves the strongest impression. The story also reminds us of something simple but important, that we never truly know what someone else is going through. In any moment, behind any expression, there may be something deeper, and the way we respond to that, even in small ways, can have a lasting impact. For Sally Field, this experience became more than just a memory from a film set. It became a reminder of the kind of person Robin Williams was. A reminder that even in the most structured environments, humanity can still take priority. As the story gently moves towards conclusion, it leaves behind a message that is both simple and powerful. That success is not only measured by what we achieve, but by how we treat others. That moments of compassion, even when they seem small, can carry a weight far greater than we realize. And in the end, it is not the scenes on screen that define a legacy. It is the moments behind the scenes, the ones that are never filmed, never scripted, and never rehearsed. Because those are the moments that reveal who someone truly is, and in that quiet, meaningful truth, the memory of Robin Williams continues to live on, not just as a performer who made the world laugh, but as a person who, understood when it was time to simply be there for someone else as the story settles into its final reflection. The moment shared between Sally Field and Robin Williams begins to feel like more than just a memory. It becomes a quiet lesson, one that extends far beyond a film set and into something universally human. It reminds us that even in the busiest, most structured environments, there's always space for compassion. There's something powerful about the way certain moments stay with us, not because they were loud or dramatic, but because they were real, because they happened when they were needed most. For Sally Field, that moment did not just pass. It remained, becoming part of how she remembers not just a film, but a person. For Robin Williams, it was never about recognition. It was never about being seen as kind. It was simply about responding to a situation in the most human way possible. And perhaps that is what makes it so meaningful. That it was not performed, not planned, but genuine. In a world that often celebrates success, talent, and achievement, stories like this shift the focus to something deeper. They remind us that what truly defines a person is not just what they accomplish, but how they respond to others in moments of need. It is in those moments that character becomes visible as time continues. The legacy of Robin Williams is carried not only through his work, but through the stories people share about him. Stories that reveal kindness, awareness, and a deep understanding of what it means to be present for someone else. And perhaps that is the most important part of this journey. Not the fame, not the roles, but the quiet impact he had on the people around him. An impact that was not always visible to the public, but was deeply felt by those who experienced it. For Sally Field, this story stands as a reminder of that impact. A reminder that even in a moment of personal loss, she was not alone. That someone saw her, understood her, and chose to help without hesitation. In the end, the story does not need a dramatic conclusion. It does not need to be expanded or explained further. Its power lies in its simplicity, in the fact that one person recognized another's pain and chose to act with kindness. Because sometimes the smallest moments carry the greatest meaning, and as everything gently fades into silence, one truth remains. What we remember most about people is not always what they did in front of the world, but what they did when the world was not watching, and in that quiet, unseen space. The legacy of Robin Williams continues to live on, not just in laughter, but in the kindness he left behind. And in the quiet space where all stories eventually come to rest, the moment shared between Sally Field and Robin Williams remains, unchanged by time, untouched by the noise that often surrounds the lives of those in the spotlight. It is not remembered for its scale, but for its sincerity, not for what it showed the world, but for what it revealed about one person to another. There is something enduring about kindness when it arrives without expectation. It does not fade with headlines, and it does not lose meaning with time. Instead, it settles quietly into memory, becoming part of how we understand the people who showed it. For Robin Williams, this moment was one of many, but it is enough to remind us that his legacy was never built on laughter alone, because behind every joke, behind every performance, there was awareness, a sensitivity to the emotions of others that could not be taught or rehearsed. It was simply part of who he was. And in that moment on the set of Mrs. Doubtfire, that part of him became visible in the most meaningful way. For Sally Field, the memory is not just about what happened. It is about how it felt. The feeling of being seen, of being understood, and of being given the space to step away when it mattered most. These are the kinds of moments that stay with a person, long after everything else has moved on as time continues. Stories like this take on a life of their own. They become part of a larger understanding, a collective memory that shapes how someone is remembered. And while achievements and awards may define a career, it is these quiet acts of humanity that define a legacy. In the end, this is not just a story about a film set or a single day. It is a story about what it means to show up for someone else, about recognizing when something matters more than the task at hand, about choosing compassion, even when it is not required. Because long after the cameras stop rolling and scenes are forgotten, what remains are the moments that were real, the ones that were never scripted, never planned, and never meant to be seen. And in that quiet truth, the legacy of Robin Williams continues to live, not only in the laughter he gave the world, but in the kindness he showed when it mattered most. And perhaps that is the most powerful ending of all, not an ending at all, but a reminder that the impact of a single moment of compassion can last far beyond a lifetime. And when all is said and remembered, when the lights instead have long dimmed and the echoes of laughter have faded into time, the moment between Sally Field and Robin Williams remains. Quiet, steady, and deeply human. It does not demand attention, yet it holds meaning that cannot be ignored. Because in the end, it was never about the scene they were filming or the lines they were meant to deliver. It was about something far more real, a moment when one person saw another in pain and chose to respond, not as an actor, but as a human being. And in that simple, unspoken decision, something lasting was created. There's a kind of truth that only reveals itself in moments like these. A truth that reminds us that greatness is not only measured by talent or success, but by the ability to be present when it matters most, to recognize when someone needs support, and to offer it without hesitation. For Robin Williams, this was never a performance. There was no audience, no applause, no recognition waiting at the end. And yet, it is in moments like this that his character shines the brightest, far beyond anything that could ever be captured on screen. For Sally Field, that moment became more than just a memory. It became a reminder, a quiet, enduring reflection of what kindness looks like when it is real, when it is needed, and when it arrives without being asked as time continues to move forward. Stories like this remain, not because they are dramatic, but because they are true. They remind us that behind every public life is a private reality, filled with moments that shape who we are and how we remember others. And in the end, perhaps that is what matters most. Not the roles that were played, not the scenes that were completed, but the moments that were lived, the moments that were never scripted, yet carried more meaning than anything written. Because those are the moments that stay, and in that quiet, unspoken space, where memory meets meaning, the legacy of Robin Williams continues to live on, not only in the laughter he shared with the world, but in the kindness he gave when no one was watching. And that is where his story finds its most powerful truth, not in what was seen, but in what was felt, and in the stillness that follows every story. When the world has moved on and the noise has faded into memory, the moment between Sally Field and Robin Williams remains, unchanged, untouched, and quietly powerful. It is not remembered because it was extraordinary in scale, but because it was extraordinary in sincerity. There's a certain kind of truth that only exists in moments like these, a truth that cannot be written into a script or captured by a camera. It lives in instinct, in empathy, in the simple decision to pause and recognize another person's pain. And in that recognition, something meaningful is created, something that lasts far longer than any performance. For Robin Williams, this moment was never meant to define him, yet it reveals so much about who he truly was. A man who could fill a room with laughter, yet still notice the quietest shift in someone's expression. A man who understood that sometimes the most important role we play is not on screen, but in the lives of others. For Sally Field, that day became more than a memory. It became a reminder that even in the most difficult moments, kindness can find its way in. That even in a place designed for performance, something real can break through and change everything as time continues. Achievements may be celebrated, performances may be remembered, and films may be revisited. But it is moments like this, unseen, unscripted, and deeply human, that quietly shape a legacy. They remind us that what truly endures is not what we do for recognition, but what we do for each other. And perhaps that is a final truth this story leaves behind. That greatness is not only measured by talent, but by presence. Not only by success, but by compassion. And not only by what is shown to the world, but by what is given in private, when no one is watching. Because in the end, when everything else fades, the applause, the roles, the spotlight, what remains is something far more powerful, a single moment of kindness, carried forward in memory, echoing long after the scene has ended. And in that quiet, lasting echo, the legacy of Robin Williams lives on not just as a performer, but as a reminder of what it truly means to be human. And when every story has been told, when every scene has been remembered and every word has found its place, what remains is not the spectacle, not the performance, but the quiet truth that lives beneath it all. In that stillness, the moment between Sally Field and Robin Williams endures, not as something the world watched, but as something the heart understands. Because life is not made up of the moments we prepare for. It is shaped by the moments we never expect, the ones that arrive without warning and ask us to respond, not as who we're supposed to be, but as who we truly are. And in that moment, When grief entered quietly and unexpectedly, what followed was not hesitation, not distance, but compassion. There's a rare kind of strength in that response. A strength that does not seek recognition, that does not wait for acknowledgement. It simply acts. It sees pain and answers it with presence. And in doing so, it creates something that cannot be measured but is never forgotten. For Robin Williams, this was never about leaving a legacy. And yet, it is in moments like this that his legacy